Consent has been moved. Let's call the roll.
Liu?
Aye.
Liu, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Huff? Huff, aye. Leyva? Leyva, aye. Mendoza? Mendoza, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Pan? Pan, aye. Vidak? Vidak, aye. That's 8-0.
8-0. We'll leave the roll open for our absent member. Okay, I see Senator Laura in the audience. You have item 1, SB 959. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Last year, I presented SB 376 in this committee, a bill intended to address the increasing use of contingent workers to replace employees at the University of California, and consequently, the negative effect it has on wages and worker protections. Since that hearing, several positive steps have been taken to improve working conditions at the UC. In July, the university announced its fair wage plan to increase minimum pay for workers to $15 an hour. Earlier this year, UC Berkeley announced an agreement to offer nearly 100 of its contracted workers direct employment. Those are encouraging steps, but there still leaves thousands of workers, custodians, cafeteria workers, groundskeepers, and parking attendants without benefits and with limited workplace protections. UC continues to subcontract those jobs in increasing numbers, despite the fact that UC's own academic studies point out that these practices result in workers being 3 times more likely to need state-funded welfare services of one kind or another. When the governor vetoed SB 376, he called for greater transparency for the UC. This bill responds to that message by requiring bidders to certify that they are in compliance with California labor laws, including recently enacted laws to prevent wage theft and gender pay disparities. It also requires detailed accounting of pay, benefits, revenues, and expenses to be provided to the university. Members, I have heard the concerns raised by the Chamber of Commerce and in the committee analysis about the unintended impacts these requirements may have on bidders, reducing competition and discouraging small businesses from contracting with the UC. It's something that I'm willing to work on in the future on amendments to address those concerns. I share those concerns as well that were pointed out. And obviously, again, trying to reduce the burdensome of requirements for bidders. Senators, our finest educational institution should not be engaged in the race to the bottom for pay benefits of its workers. These contract arrangements are bad for workers who receive lower wages and less workplace protections. It's bad for taxpayers as government shoulders the burden of providing benefits and support to these employees, and bad for the conscientious employers who are placed at a competitive disadvantage in the market. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. In support of the bill, please.
Thank you, Chairwoman Liu. Good morning, Senators. My name is Catherine Leibarger. I am a lead gardener at UC Berkeley and the president of AFSCME Local 3299, University of California's largest employee union. I am also the president of the California Labor Federation, AFL-CIO. I am here to speak in support of SB 959, which addresses some of the most significant social and economic challenges facing our state. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has reported that the use of contingent or contract labor to meet permanent staffing needs has grown at 9 times the rate of traditional employment since 2009. Recent research has shown that as a result, a growing number of Californians are living in poverty. Most are immigrants and people of color. This is happening at the University of California, a public institution that receives more than $3 billion state taxpayer dollars each year. Over the last year, we have learned that despite enrollment growth in the thousands, the number of directly employed UC service workers has actually decreased. Career UC workers are being replaced by long-term contractors that pay their workers as much as 53% less for doing the same jobs. But let me be clear, these private firms are not charging UC 53% less. In fact, in many cases, they're actually charging UC as much as 30% more than it would cost to have their workers directly employed by the university with livable wages and benefits. But poverty wages are only the tip of the iceberg. At UC Berkeley alone, 3 long-term contractors have made news this past year over widespread allegations of illegal labor practices. SB 959 addresses these problems by requiring UC contractors to provide their UC-assigned employees the same pay as directly employed UC workers performing the same jobs, and by prohibiting the university from awarding lucrative contracts to private firms with a demonstrated history of illegal labor practices. Senator Lara referred specifically to changes that have been made in this bill since its predecessor, and I won't go through those, but I do want to emphasize the point of transparency. Our state's 3rd largest employer, the University of California, employs dozens, if not hundreds, of private firms performing long-term service, patient care, and clerical work system-wide. While UC has refused to publicly disclose a list of the names and cost of these contractors, even when requested by the state legislature, AFSCME has obtained copies of dozens of contracts covering hundreds, if not thousands of workers, many of whom have worked at the university for years. The state has an important role to play in setting standards for private contractors. By guaranteeing contingent workers equal pay for equal work, SB 959 will lift hundreds, if not thousands, of families out of poverty. It will prohibit UC from spending public dollars on private employers that violate state labor laws. Most importantly, it will prevent our first-class public university from ever treating thousands of its mostly immigrant and minority workers as second-class again. And I urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Others in support of the bill?
Hello, my name is Antonio Ruiz. I have worked in UC Berkeley as a subcontracted parking attendant for 22 years. Even though I did the same job for all these years, I was never a UC employee, so I never made more than minimum wage. The wage I have earned working in UC have never been enough to raise a family. After my first daughter, Stephanie, was born in 2001, I had to get a second full-time job as a houseman in a hotel. This means I work 15 hours every day, and I had missed watching my 3 children growing up. The four different subcontracted companies I have worked for were always trying to save money on the backs of workers. In fact, six of my co-workers and I have all filed wage claims with the state of California because the last company I have worked, they had us working off the clock, missing breaks, and working schedules that are in violation of the law. On October 1st, I called President Napolitano Contract Worker Hotline to let UC know about this. They never called me back. I'm only one of many workers in UC Berkeley who work under contractors that pay us poverty wages and regularly break the law. I'm here to ask you to ensure that no other workers are forced to go through what we have to experience. I'm asking you to vote for SB 959 and make sure that the workers that make the university run can have a decent life and not worry about whether our employer is going to pay the wages we earn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any others in support of the bill?
Jill Rice on behalf of the California Federation of Teachers in support.
Thank you.
Joshua Golka with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees in support.
Okay.
Shane Gussman on behalf of the Teamsters and our 14,000 members at UC in support.
Michael Young on behalf of the California Labor Federation, also here in support.
Thank you. Any others in support? Is there any opposition to the bill? Why don't you make some room up here, please? Morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Jason Murphy on behalf of the University of California. I want to start today by saying that the University of California takes its responsibility to provide appropriate compensation for all of our employees, both in-house and contracted, very seriously. Unfortunately, we rise today in strong opposition to this measure. I think it's important to note the commitment that's been made on behalf of the university by President Napolitano to these workers via the Fair Wage, Fair Work Plan announced in July. I want to acknowledge that the university is very proud to be leading not only the state but the nation in terms of supplying higher wages to all of our employees, reaching a $15 threshold by October of 2017. Ahead of all of the municipal ordinances that have been passed in the state of California, including City of LA, County of LA, Emeryville, Santa Monica, even San Francisco, will be in excess of, to the $15 level ahead of all those localities. In addition, with respect to the announcement that was made earlier this week about the statewide minimum wage, we'll be ahead of the $15 curve 5 years early. I also want to point out that the University of California does not contract out solely for the purposes of saving money. In fact, those exact words are written into our existing AFSCME contracts, Article 5, Section B. Those same contract provisions also include situations in which the university can appropriately contract out for, and I would note provide appropriate protections in the case that any employees, for any reason, were to be displaced as a result of those behaviors. Specifically, the university is allowed to contract out in situations where there's a need for special expertise, short-term temporary needs, special equipment, and situations where the contracts are taking place at leased facilities. We've spoken in the past with regard to the previous bill about the significant fiscal implications of this bill. I know this isn't the fiscal committee, so I won't go into those in detail here, but I would note that the costs are going to be into the tens of millions for both benefit costs as well as additional salary provisions. It's true that Fair Wage, Fair Work will negate some of those original costs we'd identified somewhat, but we still will have significant salary costs. In addition, this bill provides a significant administrative burden on the university in the way we conduct our contracts. Not only will we be doing specific and burdensome calculations at each and every location to include in our bid specs for these new contracts, but it will significantly limit our ability to work with our sister partners at CSU and community colleges on joint and strategic purchasing, the types of things that, in fact, this committee has supported the university doing just within the last few years, specifically in the area of best value construction, procurement, and so forth. I've got my colleague here with me, Bill Cooper from our procurement office. He's going to speak in greater detail with regard to the Fair Wage, Fair Work plan. I've highlighted the minimum wage provisions, but of course there are other reforms with regard to transparency and accountability that we intend to put forward as a part of that plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good morning. My name is Bill Cooper. I'm the Associate Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer for procurement system-wide. It was therefore my responsibility to implement and execute the procurement portion of the Fair Wage, Fair Work plan, which we did October 1st of 2015. The Fair Work, Fair Wage plan requires that all of our contracts, all contracted service providers who do business on a UC property, that's not just campuses, but UC properties in general, must pay the same minimum wages that UC pays. That's to say that that is October, as of October 1st of 2015, that was a $13 minimum. In October of this 2017 will be 16 rather, will be a $14, and by 17 will be up to $15 per hour. This applies to all services in all areas of service provision. Also, we have implemented, for the purposes of all contracts in excess of $100,000, an annual audit requirement that they must have certified audits to ensure that they are complying with those principles. I do want to mention one thing that was stated before regarding 959. Currently, our contracting provisions in our boilerplate say that every contractor must adhere to all state and federal and county laws. So we've already done that for many years. The other thing that we are doing is, with our audit provisions, is that we are providing the capacity for a special audit in the event that there's a complaint or any reason to expect that a contractor is not performing in accordance with the minimum wage requirements, that we will conduct a special audit. These are being conducted by our internal audit organization. Since October 1st of 2015, we have issued 200 contracts and 1,300 individual service orders where fair wage, fair work is applicable. We continue to monitor those. Our contracting offices have provided webinars and training sessions, not just for their procurement folks, but also for campus users such as dining services, grounds, facilities, and whatnot, to make sure that they're fully understandable about what their responsibilities are in implementation of fair wage, fair work. We are extremely serious about the operation of this plan. I have made it a requirement that there will be no exceptions to the application of fair wage, fair work on any contracts without this expressed written approval of the senior procurement officer on the campus. So therefore, we try to get away from those situations where departments may have worked in the past in that old good old boy system. And we're going to make sure we try to restrict that. So it must go to the top. And we've made it very clear that being a personal responsibility for that CPO, that Chief Procurement Officer, it behooves them to make sure that that is followed, because it is accountable to them.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Mira Morton here today on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce, also in opposition. We have kind of concerns on two different fronts with the bill. The one of them is more specific, and that's focused on the burden that this bill would place on vendors. And I know the author has already alluded to, I received a call yesterday saying they'd like to work with us on addressing a lot of those, because we are very worried that this will actually just discourage people from bidding on these contracts altogether, which will drive up rates, drive down competition for them, and further impinge on our members and also on the UC's ability to be more frugal going forward. But our second front concern is more fundamental, and that is really about, we've put an increasing demand, as the analysis pointed out, on the UCs and, all of our public sector universities and colleges to be more frugal, to be more streamlined, to decrease their administrative costs and make sure that they put students first and without decreasing the quality of that education. And our members benefit from having these amazing universities here and that they're able to do that. So as we, push them to be able to serve more resident students and to maintain the quality, we want to make sure they have the flexibility to do that. And we're worried that this eliminates that flexibility, or at least dramatically reduces it, certainly even more so because of the additions from last year. And so we're worried that will undermine the quality of higher education in the state, which affects our employers. So for both of those reasons, we are still, happy to work with the author's office and see if we can address some of those. But on a more fundamental level, I think we'll still have concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others opposed to the bill? Seeing none, any comments or questions from members? Senator Huff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to be seen as an apologist for the UC system, because they do policies I don't particularly agree with, but I think we could all say that. Having said that, we do have probably the preeminent public university in the United States and one of the top in the world. And we as an education committee want to keep them focused on education. That's their primary role. I don't see the bill before us as really something we should be micromanaging. Now, when I was in the education committee in the assembly back before the recession, the UC system had 4 or 5% percentage of out-of-state students. And I remember us saying that, perhaps that should be a little higher. Some of the other states have a higher amount. And that would allow more of self-supporting finances to help pay the load of rising tuition rates or fee rates, because technically it's not tuition. And mindful that a third of the fees paid by those that are paying the fees are going back to return to aid and helping other students. So you have 50% of the students who are not paying anything because they qualify for various grants, and including this other aid. And then you got the ones that are paying it, that a third of what they're paying is going to support the others. And so it falls firmly on the backs of the middle class trying to shoulder increasingly costs, which grew doubled basically during the recession. Now we're concerned because we have so many out-of-state or foreign students that are in here that we're trying to put a lid on that. Why don't we just relax, let the UC system do what they need to do to stay the preeminent public institution in the United States? That's pretty simple. And I don't see this bill helping any way toward that. Let them figure out their labor. Leadership, the governor, all have input. They sit on the Board of Regents. They can shape it from there. I think we should back off, and I urge a no vote on this.
Thank you. Senator Pan?
Thank you so very much. Certainly, as a former UC faculty member, I have tremendous affection for the university. One of the things, though, I had a question about, because I'm hearing conflicting testimony, is, for example, the issue about essentially long-term contracts are continuing being, contracts are being renewed for essentially core functions of the university, not so much teaching or research, but, the administrative, maintenance of facilities, et cetera. And so what I heard from the testimony from UC is that that isn't part of, what you do contracts for. But I'm hearing from the proponents of the bill that actually there are positions and so forth. And perhaps, so could you speak to that? Are you saying there's no situations in which, let's say, there's jobs that basically you have to maintain a building or grounds or janitorial work or security that for a building that's probably going to be there for 30 years, that I would think that's kind of long-term. It's that, so I understand, something highly specialized, you just need something for a short period of time, or you need something for 5 years, you no longer need that service anymore. But if you're talking about dietary for a hospital, patients are going to be eating, for a long time, as long as the hospital's open. So can you speak to that as to why those types of positions would be contracted out? Or are they not?
Senator, thank you for your question. I'd be happy to. As I mentioned in my earlier comments, one of the categories of the contracting out that we are allowed to do is at least facilities. And so, I've not seen all the specifics of the individuals' situations that have been noted by the proponents of this bill, but it may very well be that some of those are taking place at leased facilities. In addition, even at existing facilities that are not leased, there are occasionally temporary needs, for example, cleaning out stadiums and so forth, that are year to year, but you don't need to have those people on year-round. You're going to be cleaning the stadium for many years, but you don't clean it every week or every day or so forth. So I think there are instances in those types of situations where you may have people that are brought in for those purposes.
I would note also that the original implementation and interpretation of fair wage, fair work only applied to service work that was being provided on the campuses. We expanded that to apply fair wage to fair work to leases as well. So if we're leasing that out, then their employees are required to be paid the same wages.
So let me clarify that, because Senator Pan, I had the same concern that Senator Pan expressed, because we had a testimony from a worker who had been at I assume, had been at the university for 40 years as a parking attendant, and he's a contractor. He belongs to a contract organization. Now, are you saying that through the work plan, the new work plan, that his salary will be increased up to $15 an hour by 2015 or 17?
Yes.
And every employee, including contract employees, are going to get the same kinds of wages?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can respond to that as well.
Sure.
I would note, I can't remember the details that were announced this past summer, but in fact, the Fair Wage for Work plan, if you look at the number of employees, again, talking about contracted workers that it affects, it relates to many, many more contracted workers than it does in-house employees. The fact is, many of our in-house employees are already, whether they're custodians or otherwise, are already at these $13, $14 to $15 an hour salaries. The vast majority of the folks that are going to be impacted by Fair Wage for Work are contracted workers.
Okay. All right.
Just to respond.
Please.
Certainly.
Through the chair, okay? Do you have a response to Senator Pan?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Certainly. To the question of temporary positions or long-term, I think that certainly the contract does allow for contracting out on a temporary basis or, for purpose of expertise or very short-term need. And this bill is actually not about that. I do want to underscore the point that actually enrollment at the university happily is up and should be increasing, and yet there has not been an increase in permanent service worker positions. And so it begs the question, how is this work being accomplished if not through ongoing contract work? Our own data, our own research shows that actually we have long-term contract work being performed. Again, though, this is not about the length of that, but really about monitoring how those contractors are being treated, right? And so the changes in this bill do bring, are implemented after the fair wage, fair work piece is in effect in October 2017. Still, it leaves behind all those contractors in second-class status because already those permanent employees at the University of California doing exactly the same work already will be making more and fully benefited with a voice on the job, whereas with contract workers, they will be making less, actually far less. Yet the cost of those contracts is quite likely more than the cost of actually hiring someone on full-time permanently for ongoing work. But whether it is for permanent or in a long-term or short-term capacity, we want to ensure that all contractors are treated at the same level as those doing the work at the university.
One question.
So I guess another question I'd have perhaps for the university, and again, I want to thank the leadership of the president doing the fair wage, fair work. I mean, that's very important. I appreciate what the university's done there, and the leadership they've shown there. When it comes to the contracts, is in terms of transparency, I mean, we're hearing about different things. Will the university commit to actually, I mean, the contracts you've made to make those provisions known? I mean, I assume that there aren't, we're not talking about, things that might involve national security or anything, but I think that the contract, is there a way we can make that more public? And in fact, that actually, I think, fosters more competition as well, right? People know what, if a contract actually could be done more cheaply with in-house workers, that would be evident. If it won't be, that'd be evident as well. And I think we're looking at trying to improve efficiency as well. And also, I think there is the university, I'm very proud of the university because, like I said, fair wage, fair work, it's about the university setting a standard for California. And so is that something that the university can do, make its contract provisions more transparent and available to the public and the legislature?
Senator, can I just ask a clarifying question? You're referring to the provisions themselves or the contracts themselves, or both?
Well, I would say both, but I mean, I assume the provisions are, this is about the contract, right? So I mean, I think we can perhaps you could work with the author on that, but I think transparency would help reassure people, including those of us here, that we are moving in the right direction and that workers are being treated fairly and that we're getting good value for our contracts.
Sure. I just mentioned that we're in the process now of collecting better information. We've been engaged in this process, frankly, since the conversation we had last year around 376. The contracting that we're talking about is very diffuse across all the campuses and across the entire state. So it's been quite a bit of a challenge pulling this all together. I think certainly for the purposes of putting together our fiscal estimate of impact, it's going to behoove us to have a much better understanding of where these contracts all are, and so we're in the process of collecting that now. I didn't intend to come today prepared to make the fiscal argument, so we don't have that data ready yet, but it is our intent to share additional material in the weeks ahead as we get it. We're synthesizing it right now.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate that. I've heard the author say he's interested in working with the university on this. I also I think we share, the goal of, we don't want to reduce competition for contracts and the administrative overburden, but we also know the importance of UC leadership, which I know the president has already shown a certain degree with fair wage, fair work, but to ensure that the university continues to set the great example in terms of its practices and valuing its workers and people who work for the university. And I do think that having more people, if actually working directly for the university actually helps enhance the university community as well. But certainly, I understand some of the fiscal issues. But I hope, I would urge an aye vote. We need this conversation to continue. And I know the author has heard, and he can certainly commit to it again in his conclusion if he wishes, wants to work with you to make this work out. So I want to thank you again for your testimony.
Senator Leyva?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do agree with Senator Huff when we talk about letting the UCs continue to provide a world-class education. However, clearly this bill is needed. If you have someone who's worked at the university for 22 years and is basically being told that they're a second-class citizen because they only make minimum wage, now we have a new president, and I agree with Dr. Pan, Senator Pan, that President Napolitano is coming in and making some good, positive changes, but it's also clear that leadership matters, and for 22 years, no one saw the way clear. No other president saw the way clear to make sure that these minimum wage employees were not treated as second-class citizens. So I think the bill is very much needed, and I think this sends a strong message to the students who are going to be our future leaders that we should value all work, not just work that requires a degree. So thank you to the author.
Any other comments from members? No other comments? Let me just say that I appreciate the bill. I think you have some work to do in terms of the clearing up. I do agree with the chamber in terms of the burden you've put on bidders. And I do agree with them that they need more flexibility, or we all need more flexibility. I thank the university for making the move to this new plan, and look forward to seeing some of the transparency, the movement toward equity here. But, your willingness, Senator Laura, to continue the conversation with the university and the chamber about how we can make this thing work. So with that, I would entertain a motion. What was your recommendation? Was amended?
No, do pass.
Do pass, right.
Madam Chair, if I can just.
Sure, I'm sorry.
No,
Close,
it's okay.
please.
Again, members, I want to thank you for the robust discussion. And again, I do agree with my good friend, Senator Huff, about ensuring that the UC remains the world-class university it is. I do disagree with him, however, on the fact that low-income folks that need the extra support and resources, they also pay for that. They pay through that with their taxes. Remember, this is a public university that we all, as Californians, pay for, including low-income folks and working-class families that depend on financial aid to get through the system. The bill is about achieving greater transparency, members, just as the governor asked for. We're just asking that they comply with the California labor protection laws, and that that the UC pay equivalent wages and benefits, which we didn't talk about today, wages and benefits to the UC employees performing the same job. It's been frustrating, members, to be able to get this information from the UCs. We worked all last year, and when we requested the information on the wages and benefits, they told us that they didn't have the data. However, in appropriations, they came back with the $60 million tag on the bill. So if you don't have the data, how do you come up with $60 million? But never fear, we're working with JLAC and our great auditor to obtain this information from the UC, to ensure that we can come up and provide the governor with accurate numbers of how much this is really costing us. And so I would appreciate your willingness to allow me to move this forward. Again, I'm committing to you all to continue to work with the UC and the chamber, which I'm very proud that the UC now has joined the Chamber of Commerce. Good move on their point. And also just to reiterate that the fair wages and fair pay still leaves out a couple thousand employees that are not going to be able to benefit from that. And just to heed some warning on the fair wage, fair pay. Our testimony from Antonio, he actually called the hotline that was provided and never got a call back. And so we still got to work on fine-tuning the way we roll out that, I think, a very positive program that will yield some good outcomes for UC employees that are going to be able to benefit. But again, there's going to be a whole lot of other UC employees that are not going to be able to benefit from that program. So I respectfully ask for your vote.
Okay, the bill has been moved. Let's call the roll.
This is item number 1, SB 959. The motion is due pass to appropriations. Lou?
Aye.
Lou, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Hancock, aye. Huff? Huff, no. Leyva? Leyva, aye. Mendoza? Mendoza, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Pan? Pan, aye. Vidak? Vidak, no.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
7-2, the bill is out. Okay, we have an author. Are you leaving? Senator Morrell, are you ready? Okay. His people.
And then if Leno's not back, do we want her to present for Leno?
Who's supposed to present for Little?
No, I said if he doesn't come back, should we have Huff present
Yeah.
for Leno?
Oh, okay. No, he's here. Okay, so we have Senator Morrell, and he has item 13, SB 1457. Welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you for welcoming us.